Can't get bigger than Mr. Gary Williams. If you're doing a Maryland Terrapins sports radio show / podcast, you can't get bigger than the guest we have today.
Hey man, you got the legend, you got the GOAT, you gotta respect the man, and he knows his stuff. So really excited about this one. It's always nice having him on, and it's still, even now I think that we've had him on 4 or 5 times, I guess, since we started this thing, and it never quite gets old. Being like, telling my wife like, yeah, I'm gonna go downstairs and interview Gary Williams. It's like, yeah. Imagine telling myself that 25 years ago when I'm standing in line for days on end to try and get into that Duke game in 2002. Like, it's pretty wild.
We finally splurged. We finally did it. We went premium on X, Twitter.
Finally gave Elon money.
Yeah, so that we could live stream to Twitter. So X, whatever, Twitter X. Thank you, everybody there who's watching live from there. Thank you, guys. And then we also, as always, we're on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch, which we always get like 1 or 2 viewers per episode from Twitch. It's really weird. So
I honestly don't even know what that is.
I don't ever really go to it. When we were doing this, I researched all the different platforms that do live video and streaming and have a lot of followers, and I found like the top 10. And so I set us up on as many as I could, and then X had the premium thing, but now we're back. So we're already getting some people who are excited about Gary. We got this comment from Hunter Riggs. The Grievous versus UNC game is all-time favorite. That was a great game. I don't know if it's in my top for Gary because I'm like the 90s Gary.
We're old.
Championship. Yeah. Those are all my favorite games.
The national championship, you have to exclude that from any conversation, obviously.
Yeah.
But then, that would be a good one. The top 5, top 10 Gary Williams era games. Georgetown,
that is
obviously.
Georgetown. I was just going to say Georgetown. That was an amazing game.
You probably have to include like 3 games probably from 2002 tournament.
Well, the Kansas game is a no-brainer.
UConn, maybe.
UConn game was better than the Kansas game because the whole time you weren't sure if they were going to win or not. Whereas Kansas, it was like one of those, you jump out to the lead and then it's just nerve-wracking the entire time. Please do not blow this.
Well, remember they got up on us, I think 13-2 or something off before the under 4, right? And then that's when Chris Wilcox and Lonnie were just like, oh hell no, we're not putting up with this.
Chris Wilcox said, Drew Gooden, get that shit out of here.
Yeah,
like
pretty
5 times.
I can ask him to confirm, but I'm pretty sure Gary has said that was the toughest game, the best team they played that year in the tournament.
The UConn game was tougher, man.
That's UConn.
Yeah.
That was Karan Butler and then a young Emeka Okafor, and they just had some dudes. I mean that team actually reminded me a bit of that the St. John's team that beat the Francis team in '99. Like they were just tough, and Karan Butler was insane. I mean, he was just doing everything out there, and it was one of those where just like, man, we need to win this, but I respect the hell out of this other team. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That game, the St. John's game, would be toward the top of the other if you didn't list of the opposite, which would also include the UCLA game where they were throwing 80-foot alley-oops,
the half-court oops,
and the Valentine's Day Florida State and Duke.
Now we're doing the opposite. The worst.
Duke in the Final Four the previous
gone in
year.
54 seconds has got to be.
Ooh, yeah, that's number 1 probably, or Michigan State.
No.
Oh man, I don't know. The thing about that Duke comeback, like that hurt, but like that didn't cost us anything. That Maryland had a wide open Final Four run in front of it if they beat Michigan State in 2010. I mean, that whole bracket just opened up for them. Like, how we always talk about how Maryland never gets on these lucky runs. They kind of just everything goes right, and you just kind of 4 seed or whatever just kind of figures it out. That was it. That was the one. And if Draymond Green doesn't get his big ass head out of the way in time, like we're having a very different conversation about Maryland basketball right now, I think.
And that's the last time they've really been close to one of those runs, and that's how many years ago is that now? Like 15 years?
More than 15. But the Duke game, I still have a visceral reaction about that game. The Michigan State game, I'm over. Like, it's bad and it sucks. But that game against Duke is the worst sporting experience of my
60
life.
seconds, gone in 60, or the Final Four game?
Gone in is 54, right?
54 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was there. It was
that was the worst. The
poor experience.
The best games, I'll throw a couple more into the mix. The game against UMass to get to the Sweet 16, Mario Lucas draining like 5 threes was amazing. The Elite 8 game against Stanford to get to the first Final Four was really cool. And
Tosh
then
came up big in that one.
Yeah, he did. One that is like really underrated for me was the first year off of probation. They were still really bad, and they didn't make the tournament. I think they went 2-14 in conference that year. But in the pre-season, they played Louisville, and Louisville had Clifford Rozier. You remember him? He started at UNC and then transferred to Louisville, and they were a top 10 team, I think. And they came into Maryland. Maryland beat them, and it was Johnny, Dwayne, and X were all freshmen, and Mario. They were all freshmen, and they won that game against Louisville. And I was like, oh my, because you coming off of the years of probation, the 3 straight years of just not where everything, it felt like the program was dead. And then to have that in the preseason, and they won that game, and they started getting votes and everything. It was like, it's back. It's the excitement level, even though it was a bad season. After that, that game still sticks out in my memory.
Well, they still made the tournament that year, right? Like that was their
no.
The ex Simpkins
not
Rhodes
the
freshman year?
No.
Oh, okay.
They went 2-14 in conference that year.
Okay.
They did not. Yeah.
I memory hold that. It was the year after that they when Joe and Keith came in where they got real.
Yes.
That was a long time ago.
Those are some for me. Anybody else listening? There's a lot of people listening. Just comment if you would. Tell us your favorite games from the Gary era. This is a fun thing we're doing here. So we got a lot of people watching on X.
That Duke game in 2010 at home with Grievous making that shot.
He Steele, of course,
runner.
as well.
He Steele. That was 2002 at Cole.
Yeah, that was.
I still actually believe that I didn't feel like Xfinity or Comcast Center back then really had a soul. Like it really earned its kind of place as Maryland's new home court until that 2010 year where they won a bunch of big games at home, and it really started to feel like, okay, this is back to being the way it should be.
It still doesn't have the same.
And we haven't mentioned Drew Nicholas.
It was not
Drew Nicholas game yet either.
Drew Nicholas game was amazing. Yes, against UNC, Wilmington.
Yes, Wilmington in Nashville. I bought the last two. I bought the last 2 tickets to that game and went kind of on a whim. That was fun. That was the last time I was in Nashville before this bowl season. I don't remember a lot about it, but I know it was there.
We have another candidate for worst game from Jonathan Peak. Maryland fans don't really remember that. Say,
I remember that.
Yeah, I remember, of course, but it was pretty painful. Stu Blake's
Paul Davis, I think, hit that little kind of underneath layup on. They
had back-to-back layups, in the last minute, and Maryland could have won it.
Who was the JUCO transfer big guy that we had back then? Who played Jamar Smith?
Jamar
maybe?
Smith.
Jamar Smith.
See, he also had a potential shot to tie that up. I think that rimmed out, and then Steve came down to shoot that 3 from the top that you feel like he made like every single one of them his senior year, but that one rimmed out.
And the crazy thing is, for fans, that was a disappointment that you didn't get to the Elite 8. It was like, Sweet 16, and right now, like, like you would have taken that pretty much every year since then, literally.
If you were offered a repeat of that, would you take it right now? A heartbreaking, gut-wrenching Sweet 16 loss. You're offered it right now. Yeah, right?
No. Why would I do that?
Because then it means the regular season is great. You probably have maybe win a game or two in the Big Ten tournament, and then you win 2 games in the NCAA tournament. That'd be the first time Maryland's had a season like that since then. Like
if you're
that would
smart
be
and analytical and playing the odds, then definitely you take it.
yeah.
But as a fan, March Madness, you always have to leave that window for that run, even though we know it, seems to be illegal in College Park.
Well, let's segue into the talk about this season. I mean, I think for me, the reason I don't take that is because I know the result and I know how we get there. I think if I was confident that Kevin Willard was the head coach I wanted for this program for the next decade, I might take a season like that. But I don't know if he is. I don't know if he's that guy. I hope he is. I hope things work out, and I hope he becomes a guy who can stay here for 20 years and make things work here. But I don't know whether he is. And I don't think that kind of season does much to forecast the type of coach someone's going to be. Like I would almost take the chance of being like, okay, well, he's either going to figure it out or he's not. And then we can move on to somebody else and see if they can figure it out. You know what I mean?
This couldn't be any more of a prove it year for him. Usually I feel like the prove it year is like a little later in the coaching arc, year 4 or 5. But now after such uneven results the first 2 years and just how rough last year was, both in terms of the record and visually, I think this is the definition of a prove it year. Not that he's going to get fired if it doesn't go well, but things aren't going to be good if it doesn't. And pretty much everything you see right now, I think they're a little better than a lot of the national guys think. But then again, sometimes when you're so close to it and following it, you tend to overrate things. I saw The Athletic actually today has them as a 11 seed playing in Dayton of all places. Your boy would be in attendance for sure, but yeah, I mean this needs to be a breakout year, and not just for Kevin Willard, and not even just for Maryland basketball fans, but for just Maryland fans and alum in general, because like we've discussed, between the rough football season and the lack of, even with the respectable results, all these 8-win seasons, the lack of those big momentous kind of wins everybody can remember fondly, and obviously last year in basketball, and then also you combine that with some apathy that's happening everywhere because of NIL and the transfer portal. Maryland needs a good basketball season more than it has in a long time, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we don't get stuck in a Turgeon situation again, where a coach comes in and he's kind of good enough to not get fired, but not good enough to really put you in a position to win at a rate that I think Maryland fans and the, I think, honest expectations of what the program should be would demand, right? So for me, this feels like obviously in terms of a prove it year, it's also just like, all right, well, prove it or screw up so royally that we know it's not going to work out here. Either way is fine with me. But for the love of God, don't
be in the first 4 in Dayton.
Right. Don't get a 10 seed and then win one game and go out against the 7. Like that's like the worst case scenario for me. I just hope it either really comes together or it doesn't, and we can be like, all right, it's probably not going to work out here. Let's start thinking about the next guy.
I believe what you're referring to is called Herb Sendek hell.
Herb Sendek was the original Turge, right? I mean, we talked about this, I think, probably back when we started on the air 10 years ago, that it really felt like, okay, we're doing the Sendek thing. And like, how long can you do the Sendek thing before something snaps? And in Turgeon's case, it was Turgeon that snapped, not Maryland. But
when we first started, that was not what we were saying. They had gone through 3 bad seasons, and then our first season was Melo's freshman year when they went crazy with Dez and Lehman and all that. And
yeah, it was probably the year after that.
It was a few years.
Yeah,
it was a few years until we're like, okay, is this all it's going to be? Because 1 or 2 times you're like, okay, it's variance. Like you could lose the game, but like after 2 and then 3, and then there's a pattern established, then I think it kind of got into that. At first, I think everybody's really excited, like, hey, this team's great. Melo and
2015 felt like it was legit. I mean, I actually bought Southwest tickets to Houston for the Final Four, I think in like November or something. I mean, we were we were feeling good about that team. And it didn't take long until you got into that conference season where you're just like, I don't know if these parts quite fit the way they need to be like a real top 10 team. But I will say, I think that UNC game, certainly the first half of it at the Dean Dome that year, was probably the highest level basketball we'd seen at Maryland, and at least since that Grievous year, and probably before that.
Yeah, Melo was unconscious during that game. I think that year, 2000, Melo's freshman year woke everybody up, gave them hope and excitement again. The next year, I think it was when by the end, most people said, I don't know if he's really going to get it done. And then I guess the following year, that loss to Northwestern in the Big Ten tournament is when a lot of people said, I'm out on him.
The third year was the Diamond Stone year, right?
No, Sturgeon's third year?
Yeah. No. Melo's third year that you were saying.
No, his second year was Diamond Stone.
Yeah.
Okay.
The third year was he was playing with the younger guys. You had Melo with Cowan and Herter and those guys.
That's right.
And Bruno's first year too, I think.
Jackson.
There was actually quite a bit of talent on that team.
A lot of talent.
And I think that's what really kind of turned people off, because Melo never quite got back to his freshman level, and all the other guys they just couldn't, for some reason, they just couldn't get it together. And then you look back and you see that a couple of those guys are still in the NBA. It makes you wonder how on earth they didn't get to the tournament that year.
Kevin,
let's stop talking about that. That sucks.
Yeah.
Kevin Herter didn't win a single postseason game in 2 years. A really solid NBA player with a great.
If he his third year, they could have been really good that third year. His third year, if he hadn't.
Yeah, he blew up at the combine.
Yep.
This year's team has some talent as well. I got Ken Palm open, and I got Torvik open. This is Torvik, and this is what he's saying about the roster right here. I don't know if people can see that. Let me see if I can. Oh no. Let me see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. Does that help everybody see a little bit better? That's what Torvik is saying about the players. Julian Reese averaging 15 and a half, 8.8 rebounds. Deshaun 11.5 and 4.6 and 2.3 assists. Jacoby 11.9, 3.5 rebounds, 3 assists. Rodney Rice 10.2, Selton Miguel 8.6, Derek Queen 6.5, Geronimo 4. And those are kind of the big seven. And then there's
Derek Queen is not averaging 6.5 points.
Yeah, well, I have a couple questions here. First of all, is Miguel actually a junior? I thought he was a senior.
No, that's wrong. He's a graduate senior, right?
Yeah.
So that's wrong.
First of all,
it's right though.
First of all, you're going to need more, and I would expect a lot more from Miguel and from Queen. If Rice is giving you 10, that's great, but I wouldn't count on it. And then, again, I really do hope you see some more from Harris Smith. Certainly the talent doesn't go away, and he did look better towards the end of last season, certainly the last month or so. But if he's putting up 11 and 5 and 2 assists, that's great.
That's really great.
That's.
This
I don't think he's going to be the number 2 scorer. I don't see that. I think he'll be third, maybe fourth.
They have him third, 0.4 behind Jacoby Gillespie.
Yeah, it's probably not a great sign for the team if DHS is your second leading scorer, but certainly just pulling these guys out and putting their names on paper and given what they've already accomplished in college basketball, like there is some talent out here. Again, it really makes you wonder how Willard is going to try and put these pieces together. Obviously, last year didn't work at all. And this year, I think the things we've always been talking about during the offseason when we get to basketball is kind of just like, okay, if you're not going to play the 2 big guys together, which it does seem like he's not going to do most of the time, are you going to go small at that 4 with a guy like Miguel or DHS even and run a little bit, or are you going to put guys like Geronimo and a Kapari there, or Pierce for that matter? And then is there enough shooters around those guys to make that work? And the answer to that is I got no damn idea. I mean, I really don't.
We won't know.
No
until
one
they
does.
start.
Yeah. And I'm certainly not counting on it. right?
There's kind of the 7 main guys: Reese, DHS, Jacoby, Rodney Rice, Selton Miguel, Derek Queen, Jordan Geronimo. Then there's kind of these other 5: Tafara Gapare, Chance Stevens, Malachi Palmer, uh, Braden Pierce, and the Memphis guy, Jay Young, right, is his name.
Mm-hmm.
Of those 5, you need like 1 at least, and probably 2 to be able to be competent role players. I guess Gapare is the one that most people are looking to right now, but what are you thinking about that, Jeff, in terms of whom of that second group is going to be potentially a contributor?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest questions. Obviously, maybe the biggest question is the new guys, Jacoby Gillespie, can he not be a big fall off from Jameer Young? And then the other transfers, how good will they be? But beyond that, if you're not going to play those guys together more than a dozen minutes a game, as Willard said, and I'm sure that's going to evolve during the season, depending on how things go. You don't really have much scoring at the 4. Neither one of those guys, Geronimo or Gapare, are shooters. Good news is they're both elite athletes. Like, you got 2 serious athletes at the 4. They really like Braden Pierce as a backup center. He shoots it really well. The question will be, can he, is he athletic and good enough defensively? Unlike, Callum Swanton-Roger last year, just didn't quite have that level to him. So yeah, you don't have a true scoring 4-man. So that's going to be really interesting. And Derek Queen, about a week and a half ago, he said that he hasn't really practiced a lot on the same team as Reese. They've been on opposing teams, so it seems like
they have to play some minutes together, though.
Oh, definitely, they'll have to play some, and that'll be probably really fun to watch at times. And at other times, the other team's probably just going to be making it rain from 3 because somebody's getting caught up guarding a 6'6" 4-man. So that's the challenge right there of playing together. People are always, they're going to take advantage of that defensively. Offensively, though, those 2 could, once they really get it down and get comfortable with it, they could really bludgeon a lot of people under the basket.
Well, and it'd be curious to see, like, we've heard a lot about Queen's ability to step outside, and I believe it. I know people have seen it. It can happen. I think it's really comes down to spacing. Like, can you have 2 big guys like that, and can they maneuver around each other? Who's going to be the guy who's really just kind of holding in the paint, and who's going to be the one who's stepping out? I imagine it's going to be Queen stepping out. Yeah. But then again, he's got to prove he can make those shots if he's going to be out there. So it could get weird, right? But Queen's also known as a pretty good passer. So maybe if you're doing like a high post, low post thing, seeing Queen up at the high post and kind of kicking the ball around to open shooters or trying to get that ball into Reese when he's got position
as well.
Yeah, you could imagine some fun stuff there if they can figure that stuff out. So it'll definitely be one of those years where you really do want to pay attention to the exhibition games just to kind of see how the rotations work out and see what the floor spacing looks out and whether those guys can really realistically play together. Because if they can, I think that does change the makeup of the team and certainly the potential, at least in my eyes.
And those guys are going to create so many open jumpers. I mean, Juju last year, I think, he had a little bit of a fallback year, but he's also gotten so much better kicking it out, against the double team. Queen is an amazing passer out of there. So that's the upside right there. If those guys can knock down jumpers, you're going to have to pick your poison.
There's a bunch of questions coming in. We'll get to them. Gary Williams is coming up in about 5.5 minutes. So we'll come back to your questions after that. But looking at the schedule, you said the exhibition games, Paul, that's all done with, right? The 5 days away and the season's starting, and they're starting with Manhattan. And the thing that stands out to me is they have all these games where they're 98% chance to win.
Well, hold on. Did they not have any proper exhibition games? It was just the 2 secret scrimmages, and then they're just going into it?
I don't know. This is Jeff.
Yeah, they do have an exhibition. Hold on. I should know that offhand the date. 1 second.
Because that's got to be like this weekend if it's going to happen, right?
Yeah, they're 5 days from starting. So
yeah, because usually they play the Little Sisters of the Poor in an exhibition game and then kind of move on to whoever else.
You look at the schedule overall. Torvik's got them 19-12, 9-11.
I take that back. There is no exhibition.
Okay.
All right. They're just going right into it.
Yeah.
first time for that in a while. I feel like that's been automatic. That kind of crept under my radar, to be honest, that they don't play that this year.
Although they usually don't do 2 secret scrimmages, so I imagine that second one against Seton Hall last weekend was probably
apparently looked really good, right?
Well,
so good for the
Seton Hall's butt, but yeah, sure.
So
they didn't look very good against Georgetown a couple weeks beforehand, and their butt too.
And so Bart Torvik's got him at 19-12, 9-11. That is so bubblicious.
That's
and
terrible.
Then if you go over here to Ken Palm, this is behind the paywall, so you're welcome, everybody. 20-11, 10-10. That's probably on the good side.
That gets you in.
That's on the good side. It's not on the throw a parade side, but it's on the good
that's on the get your 10 seed and beat the 7 seed and lose in the round of 32. That would drive me insane. That's exactly what that is.
This Marquette game, I think, is going to be a big tell for the rest of the season, because that's the first time they're playing. And I know we laughed at this last time. They went down to Asheville last year and lost to awful teams. But I can't believe that's going to happen again this year to these teams they're playing. They're ranked so low, all in the 300s and high 200s.
If that happens this year, I'm taking a week off from the site.
I mean, this is very much a Turgeon level out of conference schedule, with the exception of Marquette and what Nova's
Villanova
in there too, somewhere.
Yeah.
So and I'm fine with that. Like I don't, now that the RPI's kind of been throttled, like I don't think you need to do all this schedule wizardry to get yourself on the good side. But so it might be good to play those first 3 games against nobodies just to try and figure out who you are. I mean, I imagine that's all of college basketball now, because every team is going to have 5, 6, 7 new players every year, and they kind of got to figure out who they are, right? How to play together and how to make things work. And as we saw last season, Maryland went on that trip to Italy and played a bunch of games, got a bunch of extra practice, and it didn't look like they'd ever played a game together when they showed up on the court to start the season. So, who knows, man? It's it does feel a little bit like every season's going to be kind of a crapshoot, and until you see these guys actually step on the court and figure out how to play with each other, you really just don't know what you're going to get. And I certainly, would not be too concerned about the Torviks and the Ken Palm numbers, at least until you get a couple weeks into the season and you get actual stats.
So we just saw the Ken Palm and Torvik predictions, but we have a better predictor joining us now. None other than, there he is, Mr. Gary Williams. How you doing, Gary?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great.
Good,
we love
Gary,
having you. Having you on the show. Thank you for joining us, taking your time out for us. It's always a pleasure when you come on. The season fast approaching. Think most people are expecting a little better this year than last year. What do you think?
Well, it's here. I guess Monday night's first game against Manhattan. And I heard you guys a little earlier. You're exactly right. I think I'd say 70, 75% of the coaches, you've played a couple exhibition games or whatever, but you don't really know your team until you get under the gun where games count. Teams are going to do everything they can to get ready for you, that type of thing. They're not experimenting anymore like they are in the exhibition games. They're ready to play. And so you have to be ready to play. And, a team like Maryland is pretty typical of college basketball in terms of how it was organized this year. They have 6, 7 new players. They come in a transfer portal, whatever, a couple freshmen, and that's your team. And so you coach more for 1 year, I guess is what I'm trying to say, than you used to build a team. You get a freshman, you hope he's better by the time he's a sophomore, and you go from there. Now, there's no guarantees those guys are going to be there next year. And so you have to do everything you can to maximize this year.
Gary, what are your thoughts? I know you follow pretty closely. What are your thoughts on the makeup of the roster overall this year?
Well, I think there are 2 inside players. Queen and Reese are as good as any 2 in the Big Ten. I don't think, very few teams can match the skill level of those 2 guys. And they're, especially, a guy like Reese, his experience, he's been in the league a long time now. And, he certainly can help the other players that are new to the Big Ten, because there's nothing like experience. So that's still a big thing. And if you do have experience on your team, that's certainly an edge. Now, I think everybody's looking at the guards to see how they fit in. Last year, Young was really a good player, but he became such a dominant player. I think there was a tendency to stand around and, depend on him to get his 25 or whatever. And I think you'll see a different team this year in terms of the ball moving better, things like that. And, obviously, the whole thing is in these first couple games is to find out what you really have. And I think that's why Monday night's really interesting against Manhattan.
Hey, Gary, the game has changed so much recently where three-point shooting has become the dominant force in college basketball. We saw how Maryland struggled with that last season. Do you feel like if you come into a season and you realize you may not have a great three-point shooting team, there are ways to coach around that in this era, or is it just kind of is what it is?
No, I think you look at your team and you're going to take threes. That's just the way the game is nowadays. Whether you're a good three-point shooting team or not, you're going to take some. And if you're not good, you don't take as many. You watch a pro game now, the NBA started up. I saw 50 threes in one game, and that's not really a lot of fun to watch. In other words, you come over half court, you get a high ball screen, dribble, penetrate, kick it, guy shoots the three. I could give you that 80% of the time. That's all these NBA teams. They say they have all these plays. That's 70% of their offense now in the NBA. And college, Maryland's a good example. They have two really good inside players. So maybe a little old school, look inside first, then kick it out if they double down or whatever they do. But, there's a lot of ways to play, and there's not one way to play. And so I think, the one thing you have with Kevin Willard is a veteran coach. He's been through the wars in the Big East before coming to Maryland, and he's seen a lot of different styles, a lot of different ways to play. And certainly everybody likes to shoot the three. I mean, nowadays, you want to take advantage of that. But if you're not a great three-point shooting team, then you can't just fire it up hoping they go in. You have to find a way, either with your defense, pressure, getting to the free throw line. There's a lot of ways to score. Scoring in transition. If you're a good rebounding team, score before the other team can set up. Get the ball down there. So there's a lot of ways to go. And so that's what's going to be interesting with this year's Maryland's team.
Coach, with the way things have changed in college basketball, particularly NIL and the transfer rules, there's some programs out there that we all know who they are, that seemingly have unlimited money. Maryland's not in that category. So a program like Maryland, what do you think is the best way to navigate through this sort of the new paradigm?
Well, I think Maryland's done a good job this year. They've stepped up in the amount available in the NIL, which they had to do if they want to be competitive. And so you go from there. You don't have to have the most money, but you have to be competitive in that. You can't just assume guys will come into your program. Let's be honest. A lot of recruits make their decision not based on the school, the coach, but how much money they're going to get. And so you have to have money available, and it's legal. You have to have money available so you can compete. You have to be able to compete recruiting, and that's how you compete in recruiting today. This is 2024. That's just the way it is, and you have to accept that. So hopefully Maryland can continue to grow their program. But, there's a lot of things kids should look at that I'm not sure they look at in terms of, does that coach play the style of play that's best for me? Do I want to play in the Big Ten, a conference as strong as the Big Ten? And, if you look at the Big Ten this year, there's so much balance in the Big Ten. I think this year it's really difficult to predict an order of finish. I saw the AP poll. They came out and they had Purdue 14, and I think Indiana 16 were the two highest rated teams in the Big Ten. But, if you put the Big Ten up against other leagues, I would think you'd be very competitive with whoever you put the Big Ten up against.
Yeah, I ran into you a few weeks ago at the football game and couldn't help but ask you a little bit of your thoughts on the team and Queen and Reese together. And, it seems like offensively, like I said earlier, you have a chance to bludgeon people, in the paint 80s style, but also defensively with so many teams running small ball players out there, that would probably be the biggest challenge. And I think what you said, unless I misunderstood, is that a lot of it comes down to the guards defensively.
Yeah, I think guards certainly, in terms of the 3-point line, guards have to be able to really do a good job. If you're playing the ball, you know you're going to get screened from the top usually. So that's one thing. But the other thing is you have to recover high. We used to work really hard, and that's back when the 3-point line wasn't as big as it is now. But we work really hard at helping off of our man if he was on the 3-point line. But then when you go back, you go out high right away. You don't wait till he looks like he's going to get into shooting position. You go out high right away so that the one thing he can do probably is put it on the floor, but that's what you're trying to do nowadays is run people off the 3-point line. And a lot of guys can really shoot the three, but if you make them put the ball on the floor, they're not really good at passing to the open man. So you accomplish a lot by running guys off the 3-point line.
Hey, Gary, we've seen recently with some of the old school successful coaches in college basketball hanging up their clipboards, Tony Bennett at Virginia and Jay Wright a couple of years ago. I imagine because just of the insanity of this kind of world with the transfer portal being what it is in NIL, how would you feel about coaching in this era? Do you think that's something you would have thrived in or something you just been, it's like, screw this. I can't deal with all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd thrive, but
you hate it more or less than AAU basketball.
Right.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. What I would miss the most, let's put it this way, if I was coaching today, is the ability to develop a team. No coach has time to really develop a team. You have to coach year to year now, and that I wouldn't like that, because one of the great feelings you get as a coach is seeing guys get better, seeing your team get better, and that might be a 2 or 3 year process. It might not be just month to month. And I look at the way it is now. Teams can come in the summer. They get 8 hours a week, 4 hours of practice on the floor, and 4 strength-wise, conditioning, whatever. And then school starts, it stays that way. And then you get a certain number of days you can use before the first day of the season, and you can set your schedule the way you want it. Now, what we had October 15th. That was the start. That was Midnight Madness, all that stuff. And the good thing about that was you really geared toward that. In other words, you couldn't be in the gym with your players, which you'd like, but at the same time, you weren't in a situation where you were getting 6 or 7 new players into your program. So you had the summer to try to get to know your players nowadays, and now you have this time before the season starts, and then when the season starts, basically that's it. You find out, who the gamers are, who the guys that play better in games than they do in practice, and these first couple games will allow Kevin Willard to see that, and then you go from there. And it's still exciting. It's still college basketball. It's just that, things are different, and you have to accept that. You still root for your team, but, let's face it, guys are pros. They're getting paid.
Right, because you probably can't get a Landon Milbourne to stick around for 4 years anymore, right? Like that's just
I think of guys like Landon, Rodney Elliott, who really improved.
Love Rodney.
Freshman to senior. Even a Chris Wilcox did not start his freshman year, and he stayed around for a sophomore year, and he blew up, in the 2002 NCAA tournament, and all of a sudden he's a lottery pick. And a guy like Chris Wilcox, he'd probably be talked into leaving because he didn't get much playing time his freshman year. And that's the other thing that's going on. We're all, you have to be realistic. Guys are being talked to during the season, okay? And that's the biggest thing. Either they're going through a summer coach or they're going through a shoe company or whatever. But, certain coaches are not above talking to guys on your team if they're not playing well, or they might not be getting the playing time they thought they could, or just flat out say, hey, we can pay you more than they're paying, and so come to our school.
Which coaches are doing that, Coach?
Yeah, I think you guys.
That's a long list. That is a long list.
I think we all know.
One of the other big changes is all the college realignment, and I know you love the old ACC, as a lot of us old timers do. What do you think of what's happening with sort of the death of some of the traditional conferences, and that sort of merging of all the most marketable programs into just 2 conferences? And then also, what do you think is the end game of that? Where's it headed?
Yeah, well, first of all, the end game, I think, is you're seeing it in football a little bit, what they've done with the playoffs expanding to 12 teams now and whatever. And that money goes to the BCS schools. That does not get split amongst the member schools of the NCAA from the football tournament at the end of the year. Basketball, NCAA still owns rights to the college basketball men's tournament, which is $1 billion industry now. And so what happens, that money still goes to 370 Division I schools to be split amongst the conferences, whatever, it's, based on your success in the NCAA. So what basketball is looking at is when their contract runs out with the NCAA in terms of the men's basketball tournament, and then all of a sudden you might see 5 schools get together, 70 schools, Big East, without the football, but mostly football schools, and that'll be one conference, a huge conference, and then you'll have the other schools that can go and play and do whatever they want, with their things. And I can see both sides of the argument. Having been an assistant coach at Lafayette and coaching at American U, that was really a goal to make the NCAA tournament and try to, that's such a great thing for your school when you're in situations like that. But if you're at Maryland or you're in the Big Ten or the ACC or whatever, the Big 12 now, Southeast, whatever, if you don't make the NCAA tournament, you're in a little trouble after a couple of years, and that's just the nature of things now with all the money involved. And so I think that you can look at it both ways, but I think eventually 5 years from now, you'll see a giant basketball mega conference, and same thing with football. And that's the direction it's going on right now anyway.
Gary, do you feel like there's a little bit of pressure on Kevin Willard this year to kind of prove himself? Obviously, the first year was really good. Last year was pretty rough. What's your vibe just from speaking to fans and people around the program and just what you've seen?
Well, it's ridiculous. There's no way there should be pressure on Kevin Willard because Kevin's done a good job. He went to the NCAA and won a game in the NCAA tournament his first year. The second year, things didn't work out. The freshman came in, and you're going to see that in other programs. They weren't as advertised. In other words, they couldn't put the ball in the basket. They didn't play at a high level. So all of a sudden, I think you see a difference in this team with, using more of the transfer portal plus a couple freshmen, but using the transfer portal to your benefit. I think most coaches, when you look at that, you see a guy that say averaged 12 points a game in college in Division I versus a freshman. Unless you're getting Cooper Flagg or that level of player, then, it's probably good to look at that guy who already proved he could put the ball in the basket at the Division I level.
Hey, Gary, so obviously this year's team is built around Julian Reese. He's a senior. I mean, we should celebrate this because there might not be a lot of star seniors sticking around anymore for 4 years. But if you could pick maybe one player on this year's team other than Reese, whose abilities and how they play will probably dictate how far this team can go, who do you think that'll be?
Well, I was fortunate enough to see one practice a couple of weeks ago, and Queen he has the tools. In other words, he can pass the basketball for a guy his size. He's got great timing offensively. In other words, he knows when the ball should get kicked. He knows when he should try to score. He does all the things that is very mature for a freshman coming into a program. Now he comes in, he's no secret. Teams know who he is because he was rated so high last year as a high school basketball player. So I think he's the key. If obviously you want to get the ball to where your two biggest guys can score, and Reese has proven that he can score if he gets it in certain positions. So how can Queen help Reese? How can Reese help Queen? And that's the way you always looked at it when we had Lonnie Baxter, say, and Chris Wilcox. They could really play well off of each other. They knew if one guy was where he was supposed to be, then where he was going to shoot from, then he was going to get offensive position where he'd be in great shape to get the rebound in case we did miss. And all those things. The problem is all those things come from experience. But, Queen is special in terms of his knowledge of the game for a guy that's a freshman. So if they can incorporate that, and once again, here comes the guards have to know where that ball should go most times down the court. And I think you'll see more of a 5-man movement type offense instead of, say, Young with the ball out front, really trying to penetrate and then kick it and hope you make a three. I think it'll be a little different offense this year.
Gary, you know how you've been on the show with us. You know that we end every interview with fill in the blank. I'm going to ask you 5 rapid fire questions. Say the first thing that comes to your mind, okay?
Okay.
Here we go. The most underrated coach in the history of Maryland basketball is?
Most underrated coach. There hadn't been that many.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know.
We were teeing you up for Bud Billiken.
I thought you were going to say Bud. Yeah.
Hey,
Your
Bud
coach.
he was tough. He was old school. He beat the hell out of you if you weren't playing well. He didn't care.
All right. Number 2, the best place besides Maryland to see a college basketball game is?
Kansas.
Your
Yeah. Kansas is, I know Cameron, you're supposed to say that, but Kansas is twice as big as Cameron. It's a real college gym, and
yeah.
So I thought I got to play when I was at Maryland. I got to play against Kansas, and we played out there, and it was, those fans are terrific. That's one of the basketball experiences I won't forget.
Did you win?
No, we lost by about 8, but then we beat Kansas State the next day. We bust over to Manhattan, Kansas, and beat Kansas State.
Nice.
That'll work.
Your favorite Maryland uniforms are?
The braid that we had, I guess in 2002 in the championship team. I thought they were really cool. I liked them a lot. And
you just like the white with the red?
Yeah,
numbers.
You knew Maryland was coming when you saw those uniforms. Back, and I understand now. The change to the uniform and economics come into play. People buy more jerseys that way, I guess. But at the same time, it's nice to have a jersey that people know it's Maryland without having to read Maryland across the front of the uniform.
The next teams to join the Big Ten will be?
The next team to join the Big Ten will be Notre Dame.
Okay. Last one. The season where you should have won it all but didn't was?
I think Steve Francis' year. What was that, 99?
Yes.
Abina Kesey tore his Achilles a week before the ACC tournament that year. Lonnie Baxter was a freshman, but he wasn't ready to go. He was too heavy. Lonnie lost 30 pounds between his freshman year and sophomore year to get ready to play. And I think if we would have had Abina Kesey healthy, who played in the NBA for 6-7 years after Maryland, that's what we needed, because we ran into St. John's, and that's the NCAA tournament. A lot of it is who do you play? Well, we played against Ron Artest and a guard named Eric Barkley, and they were really good and physical, but Obina was 6'9", 250. So that physicality in that one game, the game was 19-19, and then they ran like 14 on us or something like that.
It was painful, Coach. Yeah, it was.
Steve Francis had his worst day. He was 4 for 13 and like 6 turnovers, and he was still the second player taken in the draft that year. So that's how good Steve Francis was.
Yeah. Before you came on, we were reminiscing about the best and worst games of your tenure. That was one of the ones that came up as one of the worst.
Yeah, that game, I knew we were in trouble a little bit physically against them, but that's when you expect. Not putting it on them, but that's when you expect maybe Francis can get you 25 or something and make up for, something. It just didn't happen that day. We were sluggish, and you guys are right. I take that personally. I still think about why we weren't ready to play better in that game. I mean, that was a big game, come on.
Yeah.
And we should be ready. But you get fooled once in a while as a coach. You think you're ready and you're not ready. And so I should have gone crazy very early in that game, because I kept thinking, things will work out, it'll balance out. We're good, it never happened.
Well, we'll just put that on Patsos and those guys.
I think Patsos had a lot to do with it. I really do. So, hey, anytime I can throw it on the assistant, that's what the head coaches do.
Yeah.
Can we blame Naki somehow? Can we blame Naki somehow?
He didn't do a good job on radio that day either.
Yeah.
He was off. He says he and Francis had bad days. So,
Gary, do you think that 2010 team goes to the Final Four if they win that Michigan State game? Don't they?
Yeah, that's the other one. Because while we were playing that, and it was funny, it was exactly the same time. Northern Iowa,
right?
Upsetting Kansas. So we would have had to play Northern Iowa and Kansas to get to the Final Four. And Michigan State did go to the Final Four. They did that, and so I think we were at least on par with Michigan State. So I think we could have gotten there. And Glenn Vasquez, nobody should ever forget. I think they do. His 7 regular season, we had to win our last 7 that year to tie Duke for first place, and Duke won the national championship that year. But yet we tied with them for first place in the ACC. Then we go into the tournament, and we're really playing well. I mean, that game against Michigan State, we got down 14 in the second half, and Vasquez just took over the game. He scored 10 points in the last minute in 10 seconds against a good Michigan State defensive team with Draymond, people like that on their team. So I feel bad about that one. I saw Gravis was up about a month ago. I saw him, and he's going to do some Wizard stuff this year. So it'll be
cool. Yeah. So he'll be around a little bit.
Yeah. You guys ought to get him on your show. He's really good.
Absolutely.
Can you give us his number, Coach?
I got to check with Gravis.
All right, you do that.
Fair enough.
We'd love to have him.
No, he'd do it. I think he'd do it. He'd love to do it.
We've had I don't know 10 or 12 rafter guys on the show, so we're trying to make our rounds through it. He's one of the ones we haven't had yet.
Yeah,
he was great.
He's really interesting because he's had so much experience internationally, but he played in the NBA 6 years before his ankle, just blew up. He couldn't play anymore.
With the Toronto, right? Wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Toronto, right?
Toronto, New Orleans.
Grievous was always, I always thought, like in college, he was so deceiving because he was an honest 6'6". He had incredible wingspan for a guy 6'6", and he could really handle, and he played so well off the defense. In other words, whatever the defense did, Grievous had an answer. You didn't have to call a special play for him. He knew what to do in special situations. And I think he'd be a great coach if he, and he's coached some since he's been out, but I think he'd be an outstanding coach.
Hey, Gary, didn't you recruit him the year that they had that big Montrose Oak Hill game that he played in with Kevin Durant and all those guys?
Durant, we went over there to recruit Durant, and somehow we weren't allowed to talk to Durant. He was already going to Texas. And so we go up and watch practice, and there's this guy running around. He's a sophomore, skinny, but he loved to play, and I always just, in recruiting, I always, if it was close between two guys, I'd take the guy that I thought I'd like to coach. And with Gravis, there was no doubt in my mind that I wanted to coach the guy because he was crazy in a good way. He loved the game. All he wanted to do was play. And when you get guys like that, there's nothing worse than calling a timeout when you're a coach, especially early in the game, and you try to get your guys, you make them realize that the reason we call timeout is to get you guys fired up to play. You never had to do that with Gravis. You never had to do that.
I was just thinking he's obviously one of the best players of your tenure. Who's your all-time 5? Blake, Juan, Gravis, Joe Smith, Keith Booth?
I think you got to put Walt Williams there.
Oh my God!
Oh, come on, Larry. Larry didn't even put his best friend on there.
I'm going to tell you left them all.
No, don't. Please.
Larry's not getting any more clutch vodka now.
Blake's
got to be on there. Blake, there's a great video floating around on YouTube, a video of Blake right now, both in college and it's only 4 minutes. But if you ever see it, you got to look at it. He's, players thought he was crazy in the NBA. I didn't see it. I knew he was a competitor, and I knew he'd fight you if he had to. But he was crazy in the NBA. You ought to see some of the highlights in the NBA where he's going head to head.
Well, Gary, I was on campus at the time, and I remember there was a rumor about a certain fisticuffs between Steve and Gilchrist.
Whether it wasn't a rumor, I was there.
That wasn't a rumor.
I saw it live.
that was after camp. Our players, the Maryland players, would play pickup in front of the campers. They go up in the stands and the players would play. And all of a sudden, John Gilchrist was a freshman, and I could just see because Gilchrist, he's player of the year in Virginia. He got a lot of attention. And, in Blake's mind, he was a threat, to Blake's position. So as soon as they got going at it, probably the first pickup game they ever played, and they went at it. So, but, that's part of competing.
Yeah. I love that. I love that so much.
Well, Gary, thank you so much for joining us. We love it whenever you're here, and we'll love to have you back whenever you're willing to come on and all of that stuff. We love reminiscing about the old times with you and talking about the new teams. So we really appreciate your time, and and all
Yeah.
you did for the program and all that too. So,
And I'll text you guys Gravis's number, but don't tell him I gave it to you. Okay.
thank you.
We won't let it out. No
I'll tell
worries.
him Patso sent it.
Thank you.
Yes, Patso.
Thanks, you
Yeah.
guys. Appreciate it.
All right.
Gary.
Thanks,
Gary.
Gary. So
Blame
there he is.
Patros. That's gonna be a running joke on this show until the end of time. Whenever something
Blame
goes wrong,
Patsos.
blame Patsos.
How
Yeah.
great was that, though? That's a great interview right there.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
Gary is the man. He's still in our lobby. He hasn't left yet, so he can hear what we're saying, guys. Just so you know.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I was gonna talk some smack, but now,
yeah.
Now I'm gonna unload on Gary Williams. Sure.
Well, there were people who did. If you remember, there was a lot of like Turgeon-esque things said about Gary, but for him it wasn't quite the same because Gary couldn't get past the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
That was
It was
his
a higher
plateau.
level, much higher level barrier.
Remember when people were talking about that, in particular
Well,
that guy Roy H. Oh, the Dookie guy, and Gary, and finally broke through, and it was so glorious. So all those guys had to shut the F up. Shut
That
the
went
H
on for
up.
about 5-ish years, at least, probably on the message boards. Gary will
Oh,
never
man.
pass the Sweet
Well, those
16. But it's funny when he mentioned that Chris Wilcox didn't start as a freshman. I was tempted to say that was another one on the board. They used to be mad at you for that. That and Mike Jones, right? Those were the two guys. Everybody
Mike
knew
Jones,
better than
yes.
the Hall of Fame coach that he should be starting
Yes.
those guys. And it was
until they finally
preferential, thing, shooting himself in the foot, or
Well, I remember Taj on the show because Taj was talking about how he was the one who was starting over Wilcox, and he talked about it. He's like, you know that the other guy's better. And so when Gary made the switch, he was like, you accept it because you just know you play with each other. And he knew Chris was the better player.
the top 10
So,
pick.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, and that was
unbelievably athletic.
Well, and that was kind of the ultimate thing, right? Lonnie was very much a below the rim kind of guy, and then you had Wilcox, who was that jumping jack four man. Like that was the ultimate like 90s college basketball setup here. And, you can confuse yourself a little bit when you look at Juju and you look at Queen in terms of their athletic profiles and their body size, and they go, oh yeah, cool, we'll play Queen at the 5. Juju can be the 4. He'll be the athletic guy, the shot blocker coming on the weak side. That's not how this team's going to work. That's not how those guys play. Like they're very they almost play the exact opposite of their body size, if that makes any sense. With Queen's the guy who wants to float out to the 3-point line. He's the better passer. So it'll be interesting to see, but that was a lot of fun. It's always fun. We have Gary on, and it's fascinating because you can see how up he is on the current state of the game. Like he's not just sitting back playing golf. Like he's dropping names, and he knows where those teams are ranked. So
if you listen to that DC Coaches podcast that he does with Naki and those other guys, it's really good weekly, and you can tell he's talking about West Coast Conference and rule changes and everything. So he's totally dialed in, not just playing golf.
Yeah, no, we got to get him back during the season. We can talk hopefully some current events instead of just reminiscing. Hopefully the current events are as nice as it is to reminisce.
How great would it have been if he had actually dropped the names of the coaches who are like trying to poach players?
I mean,
he's always lived by the code. He has always lived by the G code.
I know he's not going to do it.
He will talk all the trash in general terms, like Jim Calhoun with the Rudy Gay thing, or Debbie Yao. He'd make little comment, but it was never by name, and he never snitched on anybody, no matter how salty he might have been over their cheating or whatever else.
Yeah, he's not doing a Bruce Pearl to somebody.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was Gary, and obviously it's great when he's on the show. Is that this 4th time, something like that? I don't remember.
And also, if you just popped up in the middle of that, because I know Jeff sent out a text. That entire interview will be on the YouTube channel. Pretty much, I imagine already. If you just like rewound it, so
yeah, if you just start this in the beginning,
Spotify and everywhere else in a hour.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Once this is done, it'll become just a playable YouTube video. So,
yep,
it'll do that. So we've previewed the team this year. We had Gary on to talk about it. What about recruiting, Jeff? There's been some questions in the chat. A couple of them. I think I can pop them up here. I have to scroll. There's so many comments, but someone was asked about Mallory versus Tyler Jackson, I believe, if I can find the comment, or anything you got recruiting wise. There it is. Thank you, Paul.
I mean, neither is likely. I would say Mallory's more likely just because I don't see Tyler Jackson really being on their wish list anymore at this point. I'd be pretty surprised if that. I mean, he did say something a month or so ago about taking a visit to Maryland, so I haven't totally crossed him off. But yeah, I mean, Mallory would clearly be their choice of those two. The catch is that you've already taken your point guard in Chris Jeffrey. You were planning on only taking 2 high school recruits, which is not an ironclad thing. That's not the biggest deal. But also, Chance Mallory is going to be very highly sought with some big time programs. And as Paul's making the money sign, that's exactly at the NIL. Virginia, from everything I've heard, Virginia has a very stout NIL program. So you're going to have to come with some big bucks. And, Willard's made it pretty clear that, they only have a certain amount of money and it's better spent in the portal on proven commodities and on guys you need because the season's already ended and who's coming or going, as opposed to now where you really don't know. So long story short, Mallory, but that's still going to be a tough one.
Someone else asked,
they got one. We need.
Yeah, I was going to say, I pulled this one up. It says we need another Chris Wilcox. Well, that's Marcus Jackson, is it not? I mean, you can't promise he's going to be a, lottery pick after his sophomore year, but at least in terms of that playing style.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, the odds of him being as good are obviously slim because, like I said a minute ago, he was a lottery pick. But in terms of athleticism, he's not too far off. He's not. I don't think he's as thick and strong quite as much as Wilcox. Maybe a hair shorter, but supposedly he got measured with the 50-inch vertical, which had to be stretched out because nobody's ever even done that at the NBA Combine. But either way, he is the bounciest, most athletic front court player they've had in a long time.
Well, Gary went long, which is great. You don't interrupt him. You don't stop him.
Well, that's why I kept finding reasons to keep asking him stuff. And I'm like, I'm just going to keep doing this. I don't care.
But then there came the moment. Well, there was the moment when the pause ended, and it was like, okay, that's it. But he went long, and so we don't really have. We were going to go into some football stuff. We were going to go over the Larry's, Loxford's, Paul's picks. I don't know if we have time to pick those. I'll show it because I want you to get your props.
Oh, let's do the picks. Let's do the picks. They like the picks.
They like the picks.
Yeah,
you want to
do
that?
The picks. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All right, we'll do it. Okay, let me find.
Nothing sells like gambling, guys. Let's go.
Here we go. Great week for Paul. Went 3 out of 5. I only went 1 out of 5, so a nice rebound for Paul. I'm still ahead overall, 9 points to 6, and 7 correct versus 5 correct. Jeff went 0 for 2. So Ehrman's evaluations went from 2 out of 2 to 1 out of 2 to 0 out of 2. He's exactly 50%. We're all kind of middling there. I'd say Jeff and I are kind of battling for supremacy right now. Paul, you need another good week to catch up.
I can't go over, man. I mean, going over is going to screw you pretty bad if you're only doing this for 3 weeks.
Well, you're close now. So
yeah, we're back in the game. We're back in the game. That's all we're looking for here.
Yeah. What you guys got? Let's hear them.
All right. I have not looked again. I'm just going to go completely.
Just winging it.
I'm winging it. So you want to? Oh, well, Maryland's not playing, so we get 5 random games. So
yep.
Go ahead. You pick. Who are you taking? You want to go first?
I'm going first. Okay.
Letting you go first screwed me last week, by the way, because I was going to take Minnesota.
I know.
So you took Maryland, and then I flipped. So there you go.
I very much enjoyed that. All right. First of all, go ahead.
You enjoyed it?
Yeah.
You enjoyed that?
Yeah. Of course I did.
And Jimmy Patsos just sent me Gravis's number. So.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So we'll get him on soon.
Awesome.
Done and done.
That's great. That's really good.
See, getting results, guys.
I really want Gravis. He's one of the top
Yeah, it's amazing. I had him yet.
Argument. I think he's like not quite. I think he's like 6th or 7th all time in Maryland. This has come up on the board a few times. I think it's generational. Younger players say, of course, he's one of the top 5 ever. I think he's just outside it, but
yeah, it depends how old you are for sure. All right, let's
anyway.
see. Give me a desperate Florida getting 16 in the hook against Georgia in the the cocktail party.
Florida plus 16.5.
Yep.
I have not looked at all. Oh, wow. Ohio State -3, Penn State +3. I'm taking Ohio State -3.
I like that.
Okay. That's at Penn State.
That's at Penn State. That's in Happy Valley.
I'll still take the -3. Okay, go ahead.
All right, give me the Fighting Lane Kiffins given 7 at Arkansas.
-7, almost -7. Okay. I will take, oh, geez, I don't know. Ooh, Illinois +3 at home against Minnesota? What? That
That
seems
can't be right, can it?
backwards to me. I'm taking Illinois +3. What?
Dude,
Is that
stinks. That
What?
stinks.
Is that definitely at Illinois? That makes no sense.
Is Illinois' quarterback hurt or something
Maybe
that we
just
don't know about?
Maybe they just all got injured against Oregon.
Is somebody hurt? I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe that seems like okay, but go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Let's see. Give me NC State coming off a bye, given 10 to Stanford coming all the way across the country.
Yeah, the cross country stuff is always a good bet. I haven't researched to see how much of those there are. Are there any USCs or UCLAs or anything like that? I don't know. Okay. I just saw Indiana, Michigan State. Ooh, that's interesting. Is Rourke coming back?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
That would have helped if you did
Oregon.
some research, wouldn't it?
It would have helped. I have no idea.
I should know, but I've been heavily focused on basketball this week.
Yeah.
It's
All right.
time.
Yeah. Duke at Miami. I'm gonna do that game. Miami's -20. I'm taking Duke plus 20.5.
Yeah, so you just stole that one from me.
Is that one of yours?
It was gonna be.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I like Duke to keep that close. Okay, let's see. Washington seems to have figured it out a little bit, and they're getting 2.5 at home against USC. So give me Washington and Seattle getting 2.5.
Washington plus 2.5. Okay, I have to just find a game here. Vanderbilt's +7 at Auburn. That's what Vanderbilt's playing very well
Good,
this
man.
year.
They beat Alabama
Yeah.
last week. I was
Yeah.
watching. They had it pretty close down the stretch.
They're legit,
Yeah.
man.
Against was it not Georgia?
I'm taking Vanderbilt and Diego Pavia +7 against
Antoine, our guy
Auburn.
Antoine says Rourke is playing for Indiana.
Antoine
Yes.
says Rourke is playing, then Rourke is playing as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. All right. Go ahead. Last one, Paul.
Last one.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Oh boy. Let's see. Oklahoma State's falling apart. Clemson, Louisville. Boy, I don't know about that one. Lots of big spreads this week. I'll tell you what. Give me Navy with a bounce back going to Rice. They're getting 11.
Navy plus 11 at Rice.
Oh, sorry. They're given 11. They're given 11. -11.
Oh, wow. Okay. I was going to say that's weird, but the Illinois spread looked weird to me also.
Yeah.
So
We're really
right.
used to Navy getting points as opposed to giving them.
I'm taking Clemson -11 against Louisville. I think Clemson is a lot better than Louisville and could beat them by many touchdowns.
They certainly seem
So-
to have figured it out, but Louisville's
All
pretty
right.
good too. So
Jeff, do you know which picks you're going to
Yes.
evaluate? Okay, go ahead.
Larry, the one I'm going to disagree with you on is Ohio State -3 against Penn State. It feels like this is the year for the breakout for Penn State. It kind of feels like the long overdue where they're finally as elite as they want to be. Ohio State lost its only big challenge that against Oregon, and Ryan Day is not a big game winner necessarily. So I'm going to go with Penn State in that one. And then that Illinois line just stinks to high hell. I don't know what's going on with it. I know Minnesota looked really good against Maryland.
But that's also my game, so you can't pick that one also.
Yeah.
You have to pick one of
I had
Paul's.
Paul's name next to that. Okay. I'm going to switch.
I kind of wish I took that one, but
so I'll go So Larry, you had Paul, you had Florida, NC State.
He had Ole Miss -7, Washington +2.5, and Navy -11.
Who's Washington playing?
USC at home.
Yeah, I'll go against that one. I think USC, they're bound to even out some of the bad luck for the first half, and Washington's just not that good.
Okay, I have written the picks down. I will pop them into the spreadsheet later, and then we'll see how it goes this week, and we'll see if Paul can continue the comeback, or we'll see if Jeff can turn his.
I got to end my slide
too. Yeah,
thinking it up.
Got to do something, man.
Are we gonna talk about the football team at all? We're long, so
no. I mean, what is there to say? They're not very good. 1 week they're going to show up and they're going to look like they might be kind of okay, and then the next week they're going to show up and get blasted. And I don't think anybody has idea which week is going to be which, and we're just going to hope that they can find a way to win those 2 home games and sneak into a bowl and call it a decent year.
Here's what I'll ask you.
Last week was shockingly bad at Minnesota.
Shockingly bad.
I mean, you knew they had that in them. We've seen it already, but against kind of a mid-level Big Ten team, giving up 48 and just getting dominated like that was.
I got 2 questions that people might care about. At what point did you turn it off, Paul?
I never turned it on.
You never turned the game on.
I was at 30,000 feet coming back from my in-laws, which is kind of a disaster medically and otherwise. So my focus was not on football on Saturday, and I'm kind of happy that it wasn't. That was somehow the game was actually somehow worse than the situation I was returning from. So how's that?
I never turned it off, but I muted it and started doing other stuff. So, and then the other question. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying I don't know what you're getting from that other than I hope nobody else got hurt.
Yes. Jeff, the other question is the recruiting class. Everybody wants to make sure the season failures aren't going to affect the recruiting class. So what's your sense on that?
I mean, it comes with the same caveat as always. The college football recruiting is insane, and you never know who could change their mind. But I think this class is pretty solidly committed overall. Malik Washington is solid. He's not going anywhere unless Mike Locksley does, which is highly unlikely. He's the centerpiece. He's the guy kind of bonding all these guys together. They were sold the vision of doing some special things in the future that Maryland hasn't done. So their view of the program is not as much based around what's going on right now. You never know. Somebody could throw an NIL number at one of them and he flips. It's quite possible. But just in terms of the season affecting them and causing decommitments, I don't think it's very likely.
Okay. All right. Let's go on now to Paul's favorite part of the show. The struggling all of a sudden. Last week we talked about how good the soccer team's doing.
And
now all of a sudden they're struggling. Let's see what Wheels has to say about that.
This is Wheels with your Inside Maryland Sports non-revenue sports report. Men's soccer had risen as high as number 2 in the country, but has dropped 2 of its last games, including last night at Rutgers in a poorly refereed game that saw Maryland's coach ejected for arguing a penalty kick call. Terps close out their Big Ten regular season with top-ranked Ohio State visiting College Park on Sunday. 10th-ranked field hockey closes out its regular season. They welcome number 17 Penn State on Friday night. A win against the Nits secures the 2nd seed in the upcoming Big Ten championships for the Terps. Also on Friday, volleyball continues its slog through the Big Ten regular season with number 11 Purdue coming to College Park. The addition of those 4 Pac-12 teams has made the toughest conference in volleyball even tougher than it already was. The Terps find themselves in a 6-game losing streak with really no end in sight. Finally, let's finish up with some other less visible sports. Men's golf wrapped its fall season with a 4th place finish at a tournament in Bahamas.
Out of how many
That
teams?
4th place finish came against 12 other teams. The
Oh,
women's tournament
okay.
Well,
wrapped its
okay.
fall season
Top
with
third,
a
yeah.
10th place
We
finish
Wheels
out of
anticipated that
17
one.
teams down
Yeah.
in Wilmington, North Carolina. Finally, wrestling begins its season on Sunday in College Park with Kent State visiting. And that is a wrap on your non-revenue sports. Take care, everyone.
Kent State wrestling has some good recruits coming in this year, so that could be a barn burner right there.
Kent State
Yeah, Kent State. You haven't been looking at their recruiting
for
stuff?
wrestling?
Wrestling?
No.
Yeah, they
I
got
have
some-
not been looking at Kent State wrestling, Jeff. No.
Oh, they got some dogs. That's gonna be that's gonna be a good one.
Jeff is moonlighting for Inside Kent State Wrestling and Recruiting.com. So,
I've been to
look,
Kent State
look,
twice.
times are tough around here, man. You gotta expand your empire a little bit.
Kent State known for the protests back in the 70s and the 4 kids who got shot. But I've been there twice. My kid, that was the first place my kid committed to. But then he flipped. He's one of those.
He's one of
He
those.
flipped. You got a better offer.
Can't trust
Actually,
him.
You got a worse offer. He just went to a place he
I didn't
liked
know it
better.
was a worse offer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Larry did. Larry knew.
Yeah. No, I think I said this before. The first place was Kent State. He flipped to Indiana. He was almost full ride at Kent State, like almost entirely. Then he got 40,000 at Indiana. And I'm like, all right, fine. He left Indiana, went to Elon where he gets 0. And it's the most expensive of them all. So there you
Ouch.
go. Yes.
Starting that process myself now. Not looking
Yeah.
forward to it at all.
Yeah, it's crazy. So anyway, okay. We will finish with over under. I'm going to give you guys a statement. The number you're going to have to say over under and expound upon it. We'll start with Jeff. Minutes per game for Derek Queen this season, over under 23.
Over. I think he gets to 27-ish, somewhere in the upper 20s, I would guess.
How? Explain that if they're not playing together very much.
Magic.
If
I'll
Reese
say
is,
they play 15 minutes per game together. I think it's hard to say. I bet Kevin Willard wouldn't even know right now, but I would just say, based on his skill set and talent, there's no way you can only keep him on the court for 23 minutes a game.
but just deconstruct this, right? Like
Well,
if Reese is
I was
playing
told
30,
there wouldn't be any math.
no, but if Reese is playing 30, that's 10 minutes for Queen when they're not playing together. So how many minutes?
Let's be honest, Larry. What's the chance that Reese, with his foul reputation in the Big Ten, is going to make it to 30 each night? I mean, that's part of it, right?
I mean, I could see Queen down, Reese up at 28 and Queen maybe 25-ish, something like that. But 23 is hard to
Okay.
envision. At the same time, though, there are some defense. The only question marks about him are defensively. So he might not be able to stay on the floor. He might have some similar challenges as Reese possibly. So that'll be something to keep an eye on.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see. We'll come back to this at the end of the year, and we'll see about that Derek Queen number. All right. Of course, also barring injuries and all that kind of stuff too. But all right, Paul. Postseason wins for the basketball team, over under 1.5.
Under until proven otherwise.
You got Big Ten and possibly an NIT and possibly an NCAA and still under.
I said what I said.
Okay.
I wonder what Maryland averages in the Big Ten tournament since joining the Big Ten. I wonder what Maryland's average wins.
They've won like 3
in the Big-
games only,
I
right?
know in the Big Ten tournament because Turgeon had the worst record in the whole conference in
Yeah.
the Big Ten
But
tournament.
like they average like what 0.3 wins
It's got to be
per
half a
year.
win, yeah, something like that.
Something like that. Okay.
I don't even want to think about
They
it.
did that have one magical run to like this quarterfinals or semis, maybe that one year.
No,
They
they've
lost to
never won
Michigan
more
State.
than one.
I don't think so.
They've never won more than one.
The
Yeah, they won. They
year.
won like a second. They got a bye. They won like a second round. Then they lost in the quarterfinals to somebody.
Yeah.
That's as good as it's ever been. I
That
think.
was a magical
All
run.
right. You guys can correct us if we're wrong about that. I don't think they've ever won more than one game in a single Big Ten tournament. Okay. Jeff, number of regular season wins that would be considered a success this year, over under 20.
Over, 20. Nobody's excited about that. Last year was a rough year, and they won 16. So it's only a little bit. I guess it's a sizable improvement percentage wise, but
and it gets them to the tournament at 20 as well, right?
Yeah, I'd still say definitely over though. I think this team could be in the top 6-ish in the conference. That should equate to more than 20 when you consider the non-conference schedule isn't too daunting. So I'll say you got to get over that for people to be excited or for it to be a huge step forward.
Okay, Paul, number of games you'll go to this year, over under 3.
I'll probably end up going to more than that just by chance, but I can't with the kids and stuff. I can't quite make it the way I used to. So probably over, but not a whole hell of a lot over.
Okay. That I'm an under probably. I no way I'm going to.
I might very well be under, but it won't.
It's too far for me for weeknights.
Yeah.
So it'd have to be
Me too.
specific weekend games. Yeah. All right, Jeff. Percentage of fans who have turned their attention from football to basketball, over under 95%.
It's right around there. I'll say under maybe 90, but yeah, it's pretty high. It's hard to find something football related to write about that you think people are going to engage with, put it that way. And it's hard to blame them. They feel like the season's over. It's been some bad losses, and it's under, but not by much.
They should just go beat Oregon at Autzen in a
What's
couple
the
weeks.
spread on that game going to be? 30, 28?
A million. I don't know. It's going to be bad.
A lot.
Really bad.
Antoine Cuff says 93.5%. Okay. All right, Paul. Number of Big Ten tournament championships Maryland will win in your lifetime, over under 2.
This is tournament? The tournament
Big Ten
championship?
tournament. Yeah. 0. You don't think they'll ever win one? You got 40 years left?
I hope so.
In the next 40 years, you don't think they'll get one?
Yeah.
What evidence is there that they will win a Big Ten tournament?
Because there's 40 years.
Paul, over under 40 years left of your life.
Oh God, I hope over. I'm 44, so 40 would be fine, right? Like I'm fine with that. I'm good with that. That's a solid run, but
84.
Yeah, like I don't want to get so old where I'm completely decrepit. But like, how many conference tournament championships has Maryland won
3
in our lifetimes? 3.
Yeah, I think
one
so.
One in what 80, 84?
Yeah, someone could correct me on that one too, but I think it's 3.
Or is it 2?
No, I think it's someone stat check us. I think it's 3.
I think the Gilchrist one was miraculous. Like that was good.
Yeah, that was the miracle run, but we haven't won one since, right?
No.
And then there was one, I'm pretty sure the bias team
80s.
won one in 86 or 84. And that's it. Going back to lefty, man.
I think they have one before that.
So I'm 44. Okay, I was born in 1980, and Maryland's won 2.
And I said over under 2. I said over under
the Virgin Islands a few years ago, and there was that one they played at like a community college in Florida. Although I think they lost to St. Bonaventure there, so that's not a championship either.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah, it doesn't count. None of those.
You think
count.
it's 4 actually they've won. So there you go.
It's forever. So 1931. Are we counting that? We're counting that. We're getting Norlander on to tell us how about basketball in the 1930s.
If we're trusting Jonathan Peake, yeah. I knew it was more than the 2.
Yeah, and then obviously, the Elite 8 year, I think Lefty got in the 70s because you couldn't get in the NCAA tournament unless you won the conference title.
Yeah.
And then that one in the 80s, and then the Gilchrist one. It's bad, guys.
It's a little surprising Gary didn't win a few, as great of a coach as he was and the teams he had, but the ACC
they made finals. Yeah.
ACC was so stacked back then, North Carolina and Duke and all it was just, it was a vintage era.
Wake and NC State, Georgia Tech had good teams at times.
So according to Jonathan Peake, listener extraordinaire, Maryland has won 4 conference titles since 1931 in almost the last 100 years. 1931, 1958, 1984, 2004. I
Jonathan,
still kind of thought that there was one stuck in there in the 70s because I know, but I
no,
could be wrong.
They lost all those to NC State in
Yeah.
excruciating fashion to the David
I know
Thompson
about
teams.
the one with
Buck Williams.
Multiple. No, John. That was before Buck. Buck was like early.
Yeah, no,
80s.
that was Elmore McMillan.
Len Elmore, yes.
John Lucas.
John Lucas, all those guys. And they 1 year they lost in 3 overtimes. 1 year they lost in 1 overtime. And they were they went to the NIT and won it. And by the last time it happened where they refused to go to the NIT, and those games were what prompted the NCAA to start allowing multiple teams per tournament. Maryland's losses in those, because Maryland very easily could have won the national title. They were in the top 5 ranked. They could have easily been the second best team. They lost to David Thompson, and that NC State team is the one that broke UCLA's consecutive championship streak. David Thompson's team did that.
Larry just dropping knowledge. That was an impressive little vignette right there.
That is still just incredible. I mean, that is incredible. That is impossible.
Yeah.
It's just impossible.
I'm pretty sure it was 1976 when that happened.
No, it was earlier than that. It was 74. No. Pretty sure it was 74. But we can argue about that later.
We're getting old by the number of times per show that we're like, what year was that?
All right. Jonathan Peak, what year did NC State win the national title with David Thompson? Not the one in the 80s. I think it was
74. It was 74. I should get extra credit for that.
You sure about that?
Pretty sure.
76, 77. UCLA won again. Then 78 and 9 was like Marquette and Kentucky won in there. Michigan State won in 79.
How do you know any of those things?
Yeah, 1980 was Louisville, 81 Indiana, 82 North Carolina, 83 NC State, 84 Georgetown, 85 Villanova, 86 Louisville, 87 Indiana, 88 Kansas, 89 was Michigan, 90 UNLV, 91 and wait, no, I'm missing somebody, but yeah, something like that.
That was some Rain Man. That was some Rain Man
nice,
shit
Paul.
right there.
Nice, Paul. I did get the rest of those right though.
That's wild. Absolutely wild.
Okay.
But all right.
Anyway.
Yeah. It's sad. It's very sad.
Yeah. All right. Well, we went way longer, but that's because Gary went long, and that's
Gary's allowed to go long. Yeah.
Yes, he is. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Give us a like, hit subscribe, all those things. And we will see you guys next week, and we'll have actual basketball games to talk about. This is IMS Radio.